There's a passage in The Prince, Machiavelli's most controversial book, that most people never talk about, not because it's hidden, but because it reveals something uncomfortable about human nature. Machiavelli wrote that people are driven not by love, but by fear of loss, not by truth, but by the illusion of power. And nowhere is this more dangerous than in your relationship with women, where every glance is a negotiation and every word a calculated move. Tonight, we're stepping into the shadows of influence, into the subtle art of psychological control that Machiavelli understood 5 centuries ago and that still governs human relationships today. These aren't pickup lines or manipulation tactics you'll find in some self-help manual. These are principles of power translated into the language of desire, principles that have been used throughout history to bend will, manufacture attraction, and create emotional dependency. But here's what makes this knowledge dangerous. Once you see these patterns, you can never unsee them. You'll recognize them in your past relationships, in the dynamics playing out around you, in the very person who once made you feel like you were losing your mind. Because the cruelest truth Machiavelli ever taught us is this: control doesn't announce itself. It whispers, it seduces, it makes you believe the cage was your idea all along. Here's something you need to understand. Knowledge of manipulation serves 2 masters. It can make you dangerous, yes, but more importantly, it can make you immune. So the question isn't whether these tactics exist. They do. The question is whether you'll recognize them when they're being used on you. Before we start, don't forget to like and share this video with others who might gain something from this insight. More importantly, subscribe to Noir Wisdom and help us reach 100,000 great thinkers worldwide. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both. But in relationships with women, there's a darker corollary. It is better to be unpredictable than constant, if you want to be unforgettable. This is the principle of calculated withdrawal, and it operates on a simple truth about human psychology that dates back to our earliest survival instincts. We don't value what's always available, we obsess over what might disappear. Here's how it works. In the beginning, you're present, attentive. You create a pattern of availability that she learns to depend on. Morning texts, evening calls, consistent energy. You become a reliable source of validation, attention, and emotional stimulation. Her nervous system adapts to this rhythm. Her dopamine receptors tune themselves to your presence. And then, without warning, without explanation, you vanish. Not permanently, not cruelly, just enough to create absence where there was abundance. The morning text doesn't come. The evening call is replaced by silence. You're suddenly busy, distant. Your attention, which once flowed freely, is now rationed. What happens next is pure neurochemistry disguised as emotion. The same reward pathways that light up during drug addiction activate when the expected source of pleasure suddenly becomes uncertain. She'll check her phone compulsively, replay your last conversation searching for clues, question what changed, question what she did wrong, and most powerfully, she'll begin to chase the feeling of having you back. Machiavelli understood this principle in political power. He knew that a ruler who gives everything freely is taken for granted, but a ruler who strategically withholds creates desperation in those who seek favor. The same mechanism governs attraction. Inconsistency creates anxiety. Anxiety creates obsession. Obsession feels, to the untrained mind, exactly like love. But here's the shadow side that Machiavelli would never admit. This tactic doesn't create a genuine connection. It creates trauma bonding. It manufactures an artificial intensity that mimics passion, but is really just the nervous system in survival mode. And the person who wields this power, they become addicted too. Not to the person, but to the control, to the validation of watching someone chase them. They mistake fear of abandonment for devotion. If you recognize this pattern in your own relationships, ask yourself, are you being pursued because of who you are or because of the uncertainty you create? And if someone is using this on you, understand that what you're feeling isn't love. It's your brain desperately trying to resolve the anxiety of intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive, the same trap that keeps people returning to relationships that hurt them. In Chapter 18 of The Prince, Machiavelli advises rulers to become chameleons, to appear to have the qualities people wish to see, rather than wasting energy actually possessing them. He writes, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." When applied to your relationship, this becomes something far more sophisticated than simple lying. It becomes the art of the perfect mirror. Here's the psychology. Every person carries within them an idealized image of their perfect partner. It's constructed from childhood experiences, cultural programming, past relationships, and unmet emotional needs. It's rarely conscious. Most people can't articulate exactly what this image looks like, but they know it when they see it, or rather, when they think they see it. The master of this technique doesn't try to convince someone he's perfect. Instead, he listens deeply. He asks questions that make her reveal her values, her wounds, her fantasies, her father's failures, and then, like a skilled actor studying a role, he reflects those desires back to her. Not obviously, not all at once, but in carefully timed moments that feel like cosmic coincidence. She mentions she values deep conversation. Suddenly he's fascinated by philosophy. She reveals her ex was emotionally unavailable. He makes sure to be vulnerable at exactly the right moment. She talks about her dream of traveling to Japan. He mentions his interest in Japanese culture, drops a word in Japanese, and makes her feel seen in her specificity. The technique works because of a cognitive bias called the similarity attraction effect. We're hardwired to trust and desire people who seem to share our values and interests. It signals compatibility. It reduces the perceived risk of rejection. It makes us feel understood in a world where understanding is rare. But Machiavelli's insight goes deeper. He understood that people don't want the truth. They want their version of truth reflected back at them. They want confirmation that their worldview is correct, their feelings valid, their desires noble. The person who provides this becomes intoxicating, not because of who they are, but because of how they make someone feel about themselves. This is why the mirror technique is so effective and so dangerous. The woman doesn't fall for the man. She falls for the version of herself she sees in his eyes. The version that's finally understood, finally appreciated, finally met at the exact frequency of her soul. Except it's an illusion. And here's where Machiavelli's cold pragmatism reveals its cost. The person playing the mirror must abandon their own authenticity. They must suppress their real interests, real opinions, and real selves. They become a hollow performance. And even if they successfully create attraction, they've built it on a foundation of deception. Eventually, the mask slips, the mirror cracks, and what remains is a stranger standing in the ruins of false intimacy. If someone seems too perfectly aligned with your desires, pause. Ask yourself, are they revealing who they are or reflecting who you want them to be? And if you're tempted to use this technique yourself, consider what Machiavelli never did. What happens to the soul of a man who can no longer remember which parts of himself are real? Machiavelli wrote extensively about the use of external threats to consolidate power. A prince, he argued, needs enemies, not just to conquer, but to unite his people through shared opposition. Fear of the outsider makes citizens loyal to the insider. In the psychology of attraction, this translates into one of the most potent and ethically questionable tactics: the introduction of the rival. Competition triggers primal instincts. When a woman perceives that other women desire the same man, his value skyrockets in her perception. This isn't shallow or superficial, it's evolutionary psychology. For thousands of years, female mate selection relied on social proof. If other high-status women selected a particular male, it signaled he possessed valuable resources, genes, or protection. This algorithm still runs in the modern brain, even when we're consciously unaware of it. The strategic rival technique exploits this mechanism deliberately. It can be overt or subtle. The overt version is crude, flirting with other women in her presence, mentioning other romantic options, displaying texts or attention from competitors. This creates jealousy, but it's obvious. It often backfires because it reads as insecure or manipulative. The sophisticated version is far more insidious. You don't create the rival, you simply allow the suggestion of one to exist. You're ambiguous about your Friday night plans. You're slightly distracted when checking your phone. You mention a female friend's name with just enough warmth that it creates a question mark. You don't deny having options. You just don't clarify. The woman's imagination does the rest. And imagination is always more powerful than reality. She'll construct an entire narrative of who this rival might be, what she looks like, and what makes her special. The uncertainty activates her competitive instincts. Suddenly, winning your exclusive attention becomes a prize worth pursuing. Your value is determined not by who you are, but by the perception that others want you. Machiavelli would approve of this strategy's efficiency. Without lifting a finger, you've manufactured scarcity and competition. You've transformed yourself from one of many options into the option everyone wants. You've made her invest emotional energy into securing what she fears losing. But here's the trap that even Machiavelli's cold logic couldn't escape. This technique doesn't attract genuine desire. It attracts ego. It attracts the competitive instinct. It attracts the part of her that wants to win, not the part that wants to love. You'll get her attention, possibly her obsession, but you'll never get her peace. Because relationships built on competition never find rest. There's always another rival, real or imagined. Always another threat, always another battle. And if you're on the receiving end of this tactic, if you find yourself suddenly competing for attention that once flowed freely, recognize it for what it is. Not a reflection of your inadequacy, not proof that you need to try harder, but a manipulation of your competitive instincts. The solution isn't to compete, it's to refuse the game entirely. Because anyone who needs to manufacture your jealousy to maintain your interest isn't worth the erosion of your peace. Machiavelli is famous for advocating deception and strength, but hidden in The Prince is a more nuanced insight. Strategic weakness can be more powerful than constant strength. A prince who occasionally reveals vulnerability, Machiavelli suggests, disarms suspicion and creates the illusion of intimacy. In relationships, this becomes the technique of selective vulnerability. Here's how it differs from genuine openness. True vulnerability is spontaneous, risky, and uncontrolled. It emerges from authentic emotion and genuine trust. Strategic vulnerability is calculated. It's a performance of intimacy designed to trigger reciprocal disclosure and emotional investment. The execution is precise. After establishing an initial persona of strength, control, or mystery, you create a moment of carefully curated weakness. You share a story from your past that's emotional enough to seem significant, but not so damaged that it raises red flags. A difficult childhood, but not abusive. A past heartbreak, but not an ongoing obsession. A personal struggle, but one you've mostly overcome. The timing matters. Too early and it seems desperate. Too late and the walls are already too high. But in that perfect window when she's curious but not yet attached, when she's interested but still evaluating, strategic vulnerability lands like a key turning in a lock. The psychological mechanism is reciprocity and the intimacy illusion. When someone shares something personal, we feel obligated to match their disclosure. It's a social contract coded into our psychology. But more powerfully, vulnerability creates the feeling of intimacy. Not actual intimacy, which requires time, consistency, and genuine risk, but the feeling of it. The rush of believing you're seeing behind someone's carefully constructed facade. She'll think, he trusts me, he's opening up. This is different, this is real. But Machiavelli's principle reveals the manipulation. The vulnerability wasn't spontaneous, it was selected, edited, deployed at the optimal moment for maximum impact. The story has been told before to others. The emotional display has been calibrated through repetition. What feels like a unique moment of connection is actually a rehearsed performance. The darkness of this technique isn't just in the deception, it's in how it weaponizes one of our deepest human needs: to be trusted, to be chosen, to be the one someone finally opens up to. It makes her feel special while ensuring she's actually just another audience member watching the same show. In chapter 18, Machiavelli writes that princes must be a great pretender and dissembler. But more than lying, he advocates for controlling the narrative, making people believe that your version of events is the only rational interpretation of reality. Applied to relationships, this becomes gaslighting dressed in Machiavellian clothing, the reframe of reality. This technique is more subtle than outright lying. It's the art of controlling interpretation, of making her question her own perceptions, emotions, and judgments, of positioning yourself as the rational authority while casting her feelings as an overreaction or misunderstanding. Here's how it operates. She notices something that bothers her. Maybe you were distant. Maybe you said something hurtful. Maybe you broke a promise. Her instinct is to address it, to seek clarification or accountability. The amateur response is defensiveness or counterattack. But the Machiavellian approach is far more sophisticated. You don't deny her perception, you reframe it. You're right, I was quiet last night. I've been dealing with some heavy thoughts and didn't want to burden you with my darkness. I was actually trying to protect you. Her concern is transformed into evidence of your depth. Your withdrawal becomes an act of care. What was potentially a red flag is repackaged as mysterious complexity. Or you say, I hear that you're upset, but I think you're being influenced by your past relationships. You're projecting your ex's behavior onto me. I'm not him. I thought you could see that. Her legitimate concern is now a personal deficiency, a trauma response, an inability to see reality clearly. And you're the patient teacher, the understanding therapist, the person helping her heal from her distorted perceptions. The psychology behind this is insidious. It exploits self-doubt. Most people, especially those who've been hurt before, already question their judgment. They wonder if they're too sensitive, too paranoid, too damaged to assess situations accurately. The reframe technique weaponizes this uncertainty. Over time, she learns to distrust her own instincts. When something feels wrong, instead of investigating, she dismisses it. Instead of setting boundaries, she apologizes. Instead of leaving, she tries harder to see things from your perspective. You become the arbiter of reality in the relationship. Your interpretation is the truth. Her feelings are like weather patterns that pass through without significance. Machiavelli would see this as masterful control. The ruler who controls the narrative controls the kingdom. But there's a cost he never calculated. This technique doesn't create love or loyalty. It creates confusion. It fractures someone's sense of self. And eventually, when enough reality has been reframed, when enough instincts have been overridden, something breaks. Either she wakes up and leaves, seeing you clearly for the first time, or she stays, but as a hollow version of herself, gaslit into submission. Machiavelli advises that a prince should be slow to believe and to act. That excessive eagerness reveals weakness. That power lies in appearing unmoved, unaffected, unbothered by circumstances that would shake lesser men. In attraction, this becomes the dark art of strategic indifference. The technique is deceptively simple. Care less than she does. Or more precisely, appear to care less. Show that you're emotionally unaffected while she's emotionally invested. Demonstrate that the relationship matters more to her than to you. This creates a fundamental power imbalance. Whoever cares less controls the relationship. It's an ugly truth, but evolutionary psychology supports it. We pursue what retreats from us. We value what requires effort to obtain. We discount what comes easily. Strategic indifference operates through carefully calibrated demonstrations of low investment. You take hours to respond to texts she answered immediately. You're non-committal about future plans while she's eager to schedule the next meeting. You're comfortable with silence while she fills every gap with conversation. You can take or leave the relationship while she's analyzing every interaction. The psychological impact is devastating. She begins to overfunction to compensate for your underfunctioning. She initiates more, plans more, gives more, all while receiving less. And the cruelest part? She'll often mistake this dynamic for passion. The anxiety of uncertainty feels like intensity. The fear of losing you feels like love. The constant effort to earn your full attention feels like fighting for something valuable. Machiavelli would recognize this as a perfect application of the scarcity principle. By withholding your emotional investment, you've made it precious. You've created a market where your attention is rare currency, and she's willing to pay increasingly higher prices to obtain it. But here's what this technique costs the person who wields it. To successfully maintain strategic indifference, you must actually become indifferent. You must suppress genuine care. You must watch someone invest in you while refusing to reciprocate. You must build walls so high that eventually you can't tear them down even when you want to. This is the trap of Machiavellian power. To control others through emotional distance, you must first exile yourself from your own emotions. You win the game but lose the capacity for connection. You get compliance but never intimacy. You're pursued but never truly chosen because people are chasing the version of you that doesn't actually exist. And if you're the one chasing someone who seems perpetually indifferent, who always makes you work harder than they do, understand that you're not in a relationship. You're in a power dynamic. And the only way to restore balance is to match their indifference. Machiavelli's ultimate advice to princes is to make themselves necessary. Not just powerful, not just feared, but essential to the functioning of the state. To position yourself so that your absence would mean collapse. In relationships, this becomes the final and most dangerous technique, engineering dependency. This isn't about financial control, though. That can be a component. It's about becoming psychologically essential, about positioning yourself as the solution to problems you've often created, about making someone believe they cannot function, cannot be happy, cannot be whole without you. The architecture of dependency is built slowly, brick by brick. It starts with identifying her insecurities, her weaknesses, her wounds. Not to heal them, but to make yourself the only salve. She doubts her attractiveness? You're the only one who tells her she's beautiful. She struggles with anxiety? You're the only one who can calm her down. She feels misunderstood by the world? You're the only person who truly sees her. This creates a positive association at first. You're her refuge, her safe place, the person who makes everything better. But here's where the Machiavellian twist occurs. You subtly discourage other sources of support. Her friends don't understand her like you do. Her family doesn't have her best interests at heart like you do. That therapist is just trying to take her money. That hobby takes time away from what really matters, you. You isolate her from alternative sources of validation, support, and identity, and then you become unpredictable in providing what you've made yourself the sole source of. The same attention that once flowed freely now comes with conditions. The same support that once seemed unconditional now requires her to behave in specific ways, to dress how you prefer, to socialize when and with whom you approve, to organize her entire life around maintaining your provision of what you've made her need. The psychological mechanism is classical conditioning, combined with learned helplessness. She's trained to associate her well-being with your presence and approval, and simultaneously trained that she's incapable of achieving that well-being independently. You've made yourself the architect of her emotional reality, the source code of her self-worth. Machiavelli would see this as the ultimate consolidation of power. The prince who makes himself necessary can never be overthrown, but he missed something crucial. This level of control requires constant maintenance. You must monitor, manipulate, and manage every aspect of her external world and internal state. You become a prisoner of your own control, and the person you've made dependent isn't a partner. She's a captive, and captives, given enough time and desperation, always seek escape. Machiavelli died alone, not because he lacked intelligence or power or understanding of human nature, but perhaps because he understood it too well. Because he saw people as pieces on a board rather than souls worthy of genuine connection. These 7 techniques work. That's the uncomfortable truth. They tap into real psychological mechanisms. They create attraction, obsession, even the appearance of love. But appearance is all it is, because control and connection are fundamentally incompatible. Every relationship where power is wielded rather than shared becomes a performance. The controller must maintain the manipulation. The controlled must suppress their authentic self. And in that dynamic, both people lose what makes relationships worthwhile: the terrifying, beautiful vulnerability of being truly known and truly choosing each other anyway. The darkest psychology isn't the techniques themselves, it's what happens to the person who masters them. You can learn to manipulate attraction, engineer obsession, and architect dependency. But every time you choose control over authenticity, you move further from the possibility of real intimacy. You become fluent in the language of power, but forget how to speak the language of love. And here's the final truth Machiavelli never wrote because he never learned it. The strongest position in any relationship isn't invulnerability. It's not strategic indifference or calculated withdrawal or perfect mirroring. The strongest position is being so grounded in your own worth, so clear in your own values, so complete in your own life that you don't need to control anyone. You can make yourself available without making yourself small. You can care deeply without caring desperately. You can leave space for someone to choose you freely, which means they might not. But if they do, it means something real. These techniques are a mirror, and what you see in them says more about you than about their targets. You can use them to control, or you can recognize them to protect yourself, or you can transcend them entirely and build something that doesn't require manipulation to maintain. The choice, as it always is yours, but choose carefully, because the techniques you use on others become the cage you build for yourself. And there's no darker prison than the one where you've forgotten how to connect without controlling, how to love without leveraging, how to be chosen for who you are rather than what you pretend to be.